Welcome to the 5E model in Chapter 4. Over the years, educators have developed many teaching and learning modules relevant to classroom teaching. Knowing the strengths and weaknesses of these models, teachers can examine the relationship between the science content and how that content is to be taught. Teachers of science integrate a sound model of teaching and learning, a practical structure for the segment, and the content to be learned. Inquiry instructions. In inquiry instructions, or inquiry, students will build conceptual understandings. They'll use investigational skills and the understandings of the nature of science through inquiry procedures. 2. Students assume the majority of their own responsibility for constructing their own knowledge and understanding. And 3. The teachers are facilitators who guide the students through the process. They don't necessarily tell students. They don't give them the direct instruction. They guide them. They ask questions. And we'll talk a lot more about questioning techniques as you read Chapter 7. So there are a lot of features of inquiry and instruction. The learners are engaged by a scientific question. Often the scientific question is developed on their own. Learners give priority to evidence as they plan and conduct investigations. They're using the data. They're recording. They're doing things that normally in direct instruction the teacher would tell them, or in textbook instruction the textbook would tell them what to do. Here, they're planning it on their own. Then that helps learners connect evidence and scientific knowledge in generating the explanations. Why did this happen? What was a result of what you did in the ending result of the experiment? And learners apply their knowledge to new scientific problems, so they might come up with a new problem after they start their first investigations. And learners engage in critical discourse with others about procedures, evidence, and explanations. This is that communication piece that we talked about in the scientific processes in Chapter 2. The learning cycle model, that was developed by Robert Karplus. The main components of this are to discover, concept invention, and then concept application. And if you look down at the bottom below the chair, you'll see that I have a page number there, and I would encourage you to go to that page number and review the learning cycle model. In discovery, that's where children explore materials and discover new knowledge. They then move to concept investigation. This is where teachers build on the students' ideas in formal teaching, information, concepts, and principles that help students make sense of their own discoveries. And then concept application, that's where students construct new understandings by applying their discovered and acquired knowledge to new situations. The 5E model actually has 5 phases: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. It was developed by the Biological Science Curriculum Study in 1989, and it builds on the learning cycle model. The 5 phases of the E model and their functions are summarized in a table in 4.1 on page 91. And if you also go to page, and I'm flipping through my book, page 94 and 95, it will show you how the teacher applies the 5E model and what the student does in the 5E model. The 5E model facilitates the implementation of research-based factors that influence learning with understanding. It includes assessing that prior knowledge, scaffolding at every phase. You're scaffolding the information, building learning communities, transferring information and knowledge, and then the continual assessment that's done at every phase. Your book does a very nice job on page 91, 92, and 93 of explaining each step in the 5E model. So in the engage section, you're going to get students interested. You're going to build their background knowledge, and maybe that's reading a story, a picture book, or reading the textbook. And you're going to help students develop their question for the investigation. You're not going to tell them what they're going to do, but you're going to help them develop a question for what they might want to find out based on their background knowledge and their interest. In the Explore model, in the Explore section of the 5E model, teachers are guiding students as they develop their plans to answer questions. It's not just about having a question and then jumping into the science experiment. It's developing a plan on how you're going to test that investigation that you want to do. It's also then planning and conducting the investigations. In the 5E model, the third phase is explain, or explaining. Here you're going to use the data and the scientific knowledge to gather the explanations. Why did this happen when I did this? If you're making oobleck as an example, maybe students are saying, why is my oobleck not getting to the right consistency and my friend's oobleck is? Well, they can use their data to find out exactly how much baking soda or baking powder they put in, I don't remember which it is, they put into their, or maybe it's cornstarch actually, I think it's cornstarch, how many tablespoons or teaspoons they put in compared to someone's oobleck who put more in or less in. So the teacher's going to facilitate the questioning techniques here. They're going to say, well, why do you think that is? How many more scoops did your neighbor put in than you put in of the cornstarch? What's the difference between the two? Here students can also, or teachers can also use direct instruction to help. You might want to introduce scientific knowledge or language for them to understand. And you're going to assist students in building their accurate explanations to help answer their initiating question. The next stage in the 5E model is to elaborate, and students learn to access their knowledge, their prior knowledge based on constructivist principles, and then use it in new learning. So they're building on that knowledge. Now they understand that their oobleck needs more scoops or less scoops than what they originally thought. So they're building on that knowledge in order to get to a higher order of thinking. And finally, evaluate. And I did discuss earlier that evaluation is seen throughout all of the stages of the 5E model. So it's not just in the one stage. Teachers may be doing a formative or a summative assessment. Teachers may be just observing to see what students are saying, how they're working, are they building on their prior knowledge. A lot of times when you observe students in science experiments, you can see what they know and what they don't know just by listening. And so we have assessment, and assessment and evaluation are different things. Assessment is the process of gathering data on learning. So we're gathering data ourselves as we're watching students do science experiments. We're listening to them. We're watching how they fill out their data to see if they understand the concept. And then we're making a decision. We're evaluating based on our assessment data. And students are also doing this as they are doing their science experiments, and they're doing some inquiry-based learning in science. Always, assessment and evaluation should be based on the objectives of a lesson. And students should be encouraged to do self-assessment. They should be writing and communicating why theirs worked and maybe their partners didn't, or what they would do to change it. So we're always doing some sort of assessment and evaluation. The table on page 94, and I really hope you read through this. It's a wonderful resource, and I would keep this book just for that resource, but it will help you identify what the teacher and the student are doing using the 5E model. So the guidelines for 5E model. First, you want to plan each activity so that it involves at least the first 3 phases. Engage, explore, and explain. You want to use succeeding activities in sequence as elaborations of previously learned concepts, principles, explanations, and procedures. This is where you are scaffolding the learning. We learn one thing, our learning grows, then we add another component to that lesson, and we have students investigate, and we have them explore and explain and engage in the content, and then we scaffold it to a higher level. So students are continually building upon what they already know and scaffolding it to a higher order of thinking. We also want to use formative and summative evaluation techniques, and page 101 and 102 give you a lot of ideas on how to use formative and summative evaluation in the teaching of science. So there are actually 3 types of instruction, and I'm sure you've probably heard a lot of these 3 types before. There's the guided discovery, the direct instruction, and the textbook approach. And page 102 and 103 in your book do go over the 3 types, so I will just touch on them shortly and quickly, and then I would encourage you to read those chapters or those sections. In guided discovery, students are engaged in activities. You encourage them to explore with concrete materials. You engage children in conversation. Well, if that happened, what would happen if you did this? And those questions that page 94 and 95 in the 5E model talked about are a wonderful way to engage children in conversation that's meaningful. Direct instruction. This is where teachers present the primary information to be learned. It emphasizes learning from being told, and it focuses on the teacher stimulus and student response. It's actually very well suited to elementary students. I know we want to do everything that's hands-on and engaging, but we can put direct instruction into the 5E model because we do need to give students some explanation as to why things happen, because their prior knowledge is not going to be as high and as well developed as it may be when they're in high school. So we need to have that direct instruction, that teacher stimulus and the student response. The worksheets that you have in your textbook, the readings, they are all very important for student learning. Then the textbook approach. Textbooks can have meaningful construction of prior knowledge and linguistic input. So don't discount your textbook just for the science experiments. Reading can be more powerful in science when it follows experience and is based on prior knowledge. So maybe the best way to approach inquiry science is to have students explore, engage, and evaluate, do the 5E model, and then read about it. Because now they have that prior knowledge and they can go back and they can read and they can say, that's why this didn't work. I need to try this. And then maybe doing the science experiment first. So inquiry should be first and then text reading second. And I think in a lot of schools that's reversed in science. We read about it and then we do the science experiment. And I actually think in inquiry and science we could flip that. So inquiry is first and text reading is second. That gives students a more rounded education, and it lets them build on that knowledge that they've just gathered from their inquiry experiment. There is really no one method that's best for teaching science for all teachers and or for all students for every lesson. You need to kind of change it up. You need to do what's best for your students. Every student is an individual. Every year you have a class, they will have a different flavor, and they'll have a different need. So meeting their needs is first and foremost the most important. Maybe you have a class that just really likes to read the textbook and have direct instruction, and they're not really focused on doing the science experiments. It's kind of an afterthought for them. in today's society and with the social aspect of learning and of children growing up, my guess is you'll probably not find too many classrooms that their focus is strictly on one method, such as the textbook. Students enjoy a variety of activities and they enjoy being engaged. So, I hope that you've enjoyed this PowerPoint. Continue reading, and I will look forward to talking to you in the discussion board.